disagree with Steve's characterization that bad guys come in all stripes and flavors, if you will. If everything is a priority, then nothing's a priority. I think it is fair to say that the single greatest threat to our security here in the homeland at the moment emanates out of the tribal areas of Pakistan. That is an Islamic extremist problem. I think that we find ourselves sometimes feeling constrained about how to talk about that. The vast majority of Muslims around the world are peace-loving, religious, devout, and don't support it and don't want anything to do with this. But the problem is a fraction of a percent of extremists in that community that do want to do us harm. And it sort of goes, I think, Frank, to your point, we've got to be honest about what that is. You know, I'll give you an example about, I thought President Obama's decision to have his first network broadcast interview on Al Arabiya was really smart power. It's a station based in Saudi Arabia. They have been very active and vocal in the ongoing strife between Gaza and Israel. They have the ability to really help there, financially, politically. They proposed a peace plan. It sent a lot of good signals to the Arab world to go on Al Arabiya. But I think we need to be clear. When we talk about whether we use the term smart power or soft power, even if people around the world like us better, we have a new administration, President Obama's made this effort, and let's just presume for the sake of the discussion that it is successful, that American respect for the United States and U.S. policy increases around the world. Let us make no mistake. We are not going to prevent an attack by being liked more. And I'm not saying that that's what the current administration is suggesting. There are many good things to come from increasing our respect around the world, don't get me wrong. But you're not going to persuade Al-Qaeda not to attack you because you're better liked in the Arab and Muslim world. And so we ought to do it. We ought to do it for a lot of good reasons. But that's not the thing alone that will make us safer. And I guess my last point would be, when you're talking about the weapons of mass destruction issue, and you're looking at who are the groups most likely to be able to obtain these weapons, whether biological, I agree, is easier, or nuclear capability, you know, the likelihood of an environmental extremist group or an Oklahoma City type bomber, it is less likely that they will get their hands on these weapons that have mass consequences than an organized group like Al-Qaeda, which, by the way, has issued a fatwa, a religious ruling, saying not only is it your duty to acquire these weapons, but to use them to create mass casualties against Americans.
Let's come to the point of this book that I think was arguably most needed, which is the wake-up call on the biological component. We had last week reports, I think, out of North Africa that some Al-Qaeda operatives in that region were apparently contracting bubonic plague. Whether that means that they just ran into some bad rats or whether that's part of a program in this area, I guess is not known at this point. But Steve, would you talk a little bit about the gravity of that particular problem, recognizing what we've said, that it's easier to get your hands on. It's still not all that easy, but it's certainly easier to get your hands on it than the kind of uranium or plutonium you need for nuclear devices. But also, if you would, what you believe we should be doing about that particular problem, having spent vexing years thinking about arms control solutions to it, what can particularly the public do in the face of it?
Well, first of all, as we share the view that Fran just expressed, that it's unquestionable that Al-Qaeda is interested in acquiring these weapons, nuclear weapons, biological weapons, any type of weapon of mass destruction that they can get their hands on. Our judgment, and I think it's shared by most of the experts that we talk to in the U.S. government, is that for these groups, nuclear is hard, probably can't be done without the assistance of a government. or deep penetration of a government. So setting that problem aside, they're most likely to look in the direction of biological weapons because they can have the greatest impact and create the greatest sense of terror, which of course is the objective. The technology is more diffuse. As we saw in the anthrax attack on the U.S. Capitol, it doesn't require a huge infrastructure to produce these weapons and use them. As reflected in the report, our judgment was that the most immediate and most likely weapon of mass destruction to be used against us and our friends and allies is a biological weapon. And there have been consistent reports over the years of activities by al-Qaeda in that area. These reports you're referring to from Africa are of a piece with what we've seen in the past. Addressing biological weapons is hard because the anthrax attack on the U.S. Capitol is a case in point. This was an attack that took place in our midst. I guess according to the FBI, it was actually carried out by someone who was working for the United States government, who was able to do most of this work undetected in his own U.S. government laboratory. So if it's that easy for a person with the know-how to produce this kind of weapon, our judgment was it's very hard to simply stop it. The arms control community has its answer, which is the Biological Weapons Convention, and the Commission looked at that convention, and we certainly support it. One of our recommendations is that we ought to try harder to make it universal. Not all countries currently belong to it. We also thought that it could be usefully directed toward persuading the members of that convention to do more nationally to address the biological weapons threat, and maybe I'll come back to that point in a moment. We did specifically recommend against a traditional arms control recommendation, which is to create an international inspection mechanism to enforce the Biological Weapons Convention. There is such a mechanism in the chemical weapons area. There is such a mechanism in the nuclear weapons area. There has never been such a mechanism in the biological weapons area. An effort was mounted during the Clinton administration to establish a biological weapons inspectorate, an international inspectorate. The Bush administration abandoned that idea, and it was a very controversial decision at the time, but our commission unanimously endorsed that step by the Bush administration. To answer your question, what can we do? We pointed to a number of things that we think can be done domestically. Some of them are fairly technical in nature. We came to the conclusion that the standards for control of dangerous pathogens in the United States are not entirely consistent. There are too many government agencies that are in the business of establishing recommendations. So we called for steps toward harmonizing our regulations. We call for promoting a greater culture of security among biological experts. I think we were taken by the observation that anybody who works in the nuclear field knows of the tremendous destructive potential of the technology they work with.